You know that moment when you swear that tomorrow is the day. You picture it so clearly it almost feels real. Early alarm. Clean desk. A version of you that drinks water before coffee. Stretches like a disciplined main character and somehow enjoys productivity. Maybe even a notebook that stays open longer than 2 days. And for a brief second, it works. You believe it. Not in a motivational poster way, but in a this time feels different way. Almost like you've unlocked a hidden version of yourself that's been waiting patiently in the background, quietly hoping you'd finally ask it to show up. Then, tomorrow arrives, and suddenly, you're negotiating with yourself before your feet even hit the floor. Maybe after this one video. Maybe I start when I feel more ready. Maybe I just need a better routine. A better Monday. A better version of me that shows up on time. So here's the uncomfortable question. If you genuinely want the habit, why does it keep slipping through your fingers like it has its own escape plan? Most people default to willpower, discipline, motivation, as if somewhere inside you there's a limited battery and you just didn't charge it properly. But what if that explanation is too simple, almost comforting in the wrong way? Because habits don't collapse because you're weak. They collapse because your brain is running invisible systems that are older, faster, and far less interested in your long-term goals than you are. And once you see them, you don't really go back to blaming yourself the same way again. Then there's the all-or-nothing starter. You know this person. Maybe it's you, the one who turns Sunday night into a life reboot. New notebook, new schedule, new identity. Everything gets color-coded like this is the start of a documentary called The New Me. And for about 48 hours, it works. There's energy, focus, even a strange sense of moral superiority over your old self. But then something small happens. You wake up late once. You miss one workout. You order food instead of cooking, and instead of adjusting, the entire system collapses because the rule wasn't I am improving. The rule was I never break the chain. Psychologically, this is cognitive rigidity wrapped in perfectionism. The mind creates a fragile identity built on continuity, not flexibility. So the moment life introduces normal human inconsistency, the identity doesn't bend, it snaps. And once it snaps, the brain doesn't say, let's continue imperfectly. It says, we failed, so we stop. So the habit doesn't die on day 30. It dies on day 3, quietly, when perfection becomes impossible. But here's the twist. Some people never even get that far. Then there's the environment fighter. This is the person who believes discipline should be strong enough to survive anything. They sit down to focus in a room designed for distraction. Phone face up, tabs open, notifications quietly competing for attention, like background noise you pretend isn't there. And they say, this time I won't check it. But they do, not because they lack character, but because they're trying to outmuscle a system designed by thousands of engineers whose full-time job is to capture attention at exactly the moment it drifts. Your brain doesn't experience choice in a vacuum. It reacts to cues, visual triggers, sounds, micro-curiosities. So when environment is pulling in one direction, and intention is pulling in another, environment usually wins before you even notice the decision was made. And the worst part is not the distraction, it's the self-blame afterward. Then there's the identity splitter. This one is quieter, more subtle. This is the person who doesn't just struggle with habits. They struggle with becoming the kind of person who would have those habits. So they say things like, I'm not a gym person, or I've never been consistent, or I just don't read like that. And it sounds like explanation, but it functions like prediction, because identity doesn't change through insight. It changes through repetition that is so small, it almost feels like nothing is happening. But here's the problem. The almost nothing phase feels fake, ineffective, embarrassing even. So they quit right before repetition has a chance to do its quiet work of rewriting self-perception, and the loop stays intact. Then there's the reward mismatch trap. Wait, this is where modern life quietly sabotages everything. You sit down to do something meaningful, study, work, exercise, build something that matters later. But your brain immediately runs a calculation you didn't ask for. What do I get right now? And when the answer is not much, it starts offering alternatives that pay instantly. A scroll, a snack, a quick video, a tiny burst of novelty that delivers immediate relief. Not happiness. Relief. And that distinction matters, because relief always feels urgent. So now you're not choosing between good and bad. You're choosing between future reward and immediate emotional stabilization, and your brain, being ancient and efficient, is heavily biased toward the present moment, surviving comfortably. That's why willpower feels like friction. You're not just resisting temptation, you're resisting your own wiring. And then there's the emotional avoider. This one is often mistaken for laziness, but it's actually sensitivity to internal states. When discomfort rises, stress, uncertainty, boredom, self-doubt, the habit stops being about productivity and starts becoming a mirror. And sometimes people don't want to look into that mirror, so the habit quietly disappears, not because it failed, but because it stopped protecting them from how they feel. Scrolling, snacking, drifting into distractions, it's not random, it's regulation. It's the brain saying, anything but this feeling right now. When you step back, something starts to become uncomfortably clear. You are not dealing with one problem called lack of willpower. You are dealing with multiple systems: identity, environment, reward, emotion, each one making micro-decisions faster than conscious thought can keep up with. So the real question is never, why can't I stick to habits? It becomes, which system takes over when I try? Because the all-or-nothing starter doesn't fail from lack of effort. They fail from fragile identity rules. The environment fighter doesn't fail from weakness. They fail from competing cues that win before awareness catches up. The identity splitter doesn't fail from laziness. They fail from trying to act before they've allowed repetition to build belief. The reward mismatch loop doesn't fail from lack of desire. It fails from a brain prioritizing now over later under fatigue and overload. And the emotional avoider doesn't fail at habits. They reroute away from discomfort before the habit even becomes relevant. So maybe the shift isn't about trying harder. Maybe it's about making habits so small, so supported, so frictionless, that your old systems don't even get a chance to interrupt. Because habits don't survive war. They survive design. And once you see that clearly, you stop asking what's wrong with you and start noticing what your environment, your identity, and your attention have been doing all along when you weren't looking. And strangely enough, that awareness alone is often the first habit that actually sticks and quietly starts changing everything else in the background without you forcing it at all.